right. Thanks for joining, everybody. We'll give it a couple of minutes for those who are in the waiting room to come in. My name's James. I work with Giraffe, and we'll be going through the first steps today of how to get connected, get signed up, and then how to make a project. If you are new to Giraffe, head to the website, giraffe.build, hit the big Get Started button, and that'll help you get an account. And just for those playing at home, that is here. Giraffe.build, 1R, 2Fs. And then this Get Started for free will help you go through and sign up for an account. All right, so let's dive in. I assume most people on the call have at least logged in at this stage and they can see their home screen. So on these calls, we like to go through at a very high level how to go from what does Giraffe do through to creating your own first project and doing some massing. There are lots of different things that Giraffe can do, but in our 101, we tend to focus on just those first steps, connecting to some context data, creating a project, doing a drawing, and understanding some math. So 1, 2, 3, 4. What we're looking at right now is my home screen. I have my home screen set up with all sorts of interesting data. And the first principle on the home screen is that I can see all my projects on the map, and that is under my portfolio layer. Now, if you've logged into Giraffe and you're not seeing the portfolio layer, you can always hit the logo in the top left, and that'll take you to your home screen, but likely it'll be empty because you don't have any projects yet. The layers we're seeing on the left-hand side, these are GIS data layers, and we'll go through those in a second. The table down the bottom is the data table, and you can focus that data table on any of the GIS data sets that we're connected to, including our portfolio of projects. And then on the right-hand side of the screen, this is the data panel. And on the panel, we at the moment are seeing all our projects, but if we were to click on a project, we'd see the metadata on that project. Just like if we were to click on a GIS data set, we'd get the investigative stuff here on the right-hand side. So let's go ahead and add some data layers. Whether you're in a project or in the home screen, the experience is basically the same. I'm going to dive into a market here. Over on the Layers tab, you hit the plus button and you get access to Giraffe's layer library. Now, our layer library is a bit different to some other companies out there that do similar things to us. The whole concept of our library is that you can connect to, curate, and standardize your own GIS data sets. Now, we also do offer some standardized data sets. You can search here for all sorts of things like flood. These are going to go and connect you to FEMA's flood database or any other kind of flood database that we might have on Giraffe. And there's lots of these. So flood, wetlands, all the classics that you would imagine from FEMA or from US Geological Survey. They're in here. 3-foot contours, you can type contours. But there's also hundreds of open data sets that are coming directly from the city or directly from the county. And you can create your own connections. If you're on the free version, you won't see this, but the blue tab here on the top right says create new data layer. And you can see in the create new data layer section, I can add my own data types from any source. Vectors include things like Google Earth files, KML, KMZ, CSV of, a CSV of addresses, for instance, will work in Giraffe. It'll drop some points on there. All sorts of data can become available to you. And then also you can connect via API directly to map servers or feature servers. All of that being said, if I was to say, want to look at my data layers by my workspace, I can just quickly say, show me all the data layers that Giraffe team has access to. And if you're collaborating with an in-house design GIS team, that becomes a great way to distribute out data. So from a 101 point of view, getting started, let's add some environmental data sets. Let's add in the flood data from FEMA. So type flood and look for 2024 flood hazard zones. type wetlands and add in the 2024 wetlands by just clicking on the tick. Contours, I like this elevation contours layer USA 3D EP. That's coming straight from the US Geological Survey and has 3-foot intervals. And that'll probably do us. So once you've got the data layers you want, close the library down, and those will add to your home screen. So you can see now here, I've got quite a lot of data on, and I can turn on the flood hazards. And if I then zoom in at the appropriate zoom, the hazard zones pop up in my background. So even though they're on my home screen, I don't have to see them all the time. I can turn them on and off with this show hide button here. I might take 1 second to just spruik a layer we sell. This is a layer we sell on behalf of a company called Regrid. Regrid are a nationwide provider of parcels within the US. They also do Canada now. This data set's awesome. It's sort of a foundational layer for what we do. And if you just have a quick look at my screen here, because you won't have access to it as it's a paid layer, you can see this is every parcel in the United States. If I click on a parcel, on the right-hand side, I get its metadata, what the zoning is, what that zoning typology is, which is really helpful if you're doing searches, who the owner is, what the taxable value is, all the things that you would expect from a parcel data source is there in that Regrid data set. So if you become a customer, that's a great little add-on. And just to maybe go 1 step deeper here, I'll use this data set because we have this beautiful table down here, which right now is focused on the Regrid dataset. If I want to filter that the GIS dataset there, I can just click on the column I want to filter it on, and I can type the field, the value I want it to filter on. I can say, show me all the parcels that are zoned for multifamily, and it will drop out all the stuff that's not. So that experience of working with a GIS dataset, creating a library, adding it to my home screen as a layer, and then interacting with it via the table is very compelling, and obviously can apply to any vector dataset that you have. Okay, so now we've got some data in. Let's create a project. And there's a few different ways you can create a project. You can pop up here to the right-hand side, and you could just hit the new project button. You can go quick project, which will allow you to draw your boundaries straight away. Or if there's something on the map you want to use as the starting point, you can right click on it. So in this case, I want to start with the boundary from Regrid and hit create new project. Now, when I create a new project, because I've got an enterprise workspace, I can save all sorts of different parameters against my project. You guys most likely won't have that. So let's just hit save project and go straight in. And one of the things I like to point out at this stage is because Giraffe is really built to be a collaborative tool. If I want to then add somebody to my to the project, I'm going to add in Holly here. I can just put her email address in, give her edit access, and she will have permission to join the project now as I'm working. All right, so let's go into the project and move out of layer mode and into drawing mode. And drawing mode really is what Giraffe is all about. This is the value. We're not just a GIS tool. We're really here to be able to sketch things out quickly and get some math. As you can see, I've got my boundary is drawn and it's perfectly matching the parcel boundary. And I've still got all my data layers from the home screen. I can continue to add or remove those based on the project requirements. But I have a different suite of tools now. I have on the top drawing toolbar, I've got my drawing tools. On the right-hand side, the project panel has turned into my analytics panel. And you can see I've now got my top metrics. And we'll go deeper on all of this stuff in a minute. So first thing I'm going to do is just scrap the site. I'm going to turn the 3D buildings layer off. I'm going to hit the little eye, get rid of that. And now I can just start free drawing. And I'm going to use from the toolbar up here, I'm going to click on the buildings tool. And the first thing I want to do is build a residential building. So I'll select residential. And when I draw the residential building, I can draw it with a rectangle. When I first click and release, I can now type the exact width that I want. If I hold shift, I can snap to 15-degree increments on true north. And if I go down 211, let's say, then I can fix my depth of my rectangle. Okay, so go ahead and draw some rectangles. If you hit R on your keyboard, you can draw rectangles till kingdom come. And it's very fun. I like drawing rectangles. If you click and drag your rectangles, you can draw the length and breadth at the same time. So very cool. And if you're I should mention, if you're a designer and your project is not true north, like mine's not really true north, it's got some kind of weird boundary, you can actually change true north to be project north. And let's do that real quick. If you're into the detail, you'll appreciate this. We can go up to these three dots up here, say snap and grid. I want to edit the grid, and I'm going to select the corner of the site here and go up, the boundary. I'm just holding S to snap, and I don't know if you noticed that, but it just tweaked the screen by 1 degree basically. And now my project is going straight up and down to the site boundary, which is super helpful. Okay, so if you love grids, by the way, you can also set the width of the grid, and you can get really granular there if you want. Turn the grid on and off with G. Great way to design if you like working with the grid. So let's go back to our rectangles and have a look at what we've done. And by the way, I'm using T on my keyboard to pop in and out of 2D and 3D mode. You can do that down here as well on the bottom right. I find it to be very helpful if you're moving quickly, or if you're drawing something in 2D and then you want to snap into 3D to see what it looks like, to just keep my hand on the T on my keyboard. So what's happened here is I've drawn a bunch of rectangles that have no use, and then I've drawn a rectangle that has a use. And you can see the difference between the two is up here on the properties panel. When I click on the tool, the rectangle that I've drawn, I can see this one has a use assigned to it. If I click on this one, it doesn't have a use assigned to it. So let's go ahead and assign some other uses. I'm going to say this guy over here maybe is a commercial building. This one over here is large format retail. Maybe this guy is a strip retail. This is going to be a big park, so we'll call it landscape. And this over here is a car park. All right, cool. So I've just programmed my site very quickly with a couple of different uses. And you should note that with Giraffe, all of this is stackable. They're like Lego blocks now. If I pick up the Resi and I pop it on top of the large format retail, it'll just jump on top. And I can always choose the order in which things jump on top by adjusting this stack order here. So for instance, these two are stacking on top of each other, but I might want to place the retail on top of the Resi so that it has this nice hat. And whilst that's an engineering feat, if for whatever reason I wanted to do that, I can, and there's nothing in Giraffe stopping you from doing that. So I just change this stack order, and that will then reflect where I want it to sit in the stack. That's particularly helpful if you have multiple items, like the Resi overhanging these two guys here, for instance, the strip retail and the large format retail. If I want to blend program on a ground floor or something like that, or perhaps I want them to be tiered, like maybe it's commercial instead of retail, then I can just slot it in there based on its stack order, or maybe stick it on top, depending on what we want to do. So stack order becomes your best friend. I love stack order, particularly if you're doing, cool mixed use projects. Now let's talk a little bit about assumptions. So the magic here, whilst you're playing with the design, is that on the right-hand side, all our areas are immediately calculated. They're done. We've got a dwelling count, we've got our total gross areas, We have a FAR that's being calculated, and that's all happening dynamically as we're designing. We don't even have to think about it. There are some things we want to think about, like the assumptions that are driving those outputs, and those we want to pay very, very close attention to. So let's just cover off a few basics before we go down the route of the assumptions. Gross building area, GBA, that's fairly self-explanatory. It is the gross area of everything that we've drawn broken out by use. So if I increase the number of levels of residential to 100, then what's happening in the math there is take a ground floor plate of 25,620 multiplied by 100, and there's our 2.56 million square feet of resi. So super helpful. And then what's these next metrics here is the gross floor area and the net rentable. And those are going to be factored down by an assumption. So we'll come back to that in a minute. This tower is hilarious. So that gross build area is the simplest, and it's basically just reporting back what we've designed. As that then filters down through the urban tab, the FAR is taking the gross, the gross area and applying it over the site area. If I then change tab to the net rentable, the FAR changes to be the net rentable over the site area, or if the same with the gross floor area. So you can keep quite a lot of control over what the definition of FAR is here, whether using the gross or the net. Max height is taking the combined floor to floors and adding them all together and giving us a maximum project height. Come back to that in a minute. Facade area, floor facade ratio, basement area, all of that is being measured and reporting live. Car parks, how many were required versus how many we've provided, and then obviously number of dwellings. So you can see it starts simple, just measuring, but then as we drive through, there's quite a high degree of granularity around the assumptions that are coming in here. So clearly, you need to be able to control those assumptions. It wouldn't be very good to just rely on Giraffe. Where are all those things stored? They're stored on the use. So we have lots of different uses, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different uses. And I could go and investigate whatever use I've clicked on by just clicking the sliders over here to open up the panel that has all the data for our assumptions. So here's our usages panel. And at the moment, we're focused on residential. And you can see here, as I mentioned, logically, we're stepping through different levels of detail in assumptions. We're starting with efficiency. What is the gross to net ratio? There's two efficiencies, one to get to a GFA and one to get to a net rentable. And you can control both of those. For most of us, we'll care basically about gross to net rentable. Floor to floor, how tall is each ceiling? And then, well, not ceiling, how tall is it from slab to slab, and how are we going to stack those all together? Do we need visitor parking? What are the size of the dwellings? What's the mix of the dwellings? How many parking spaces do we need per dwelling? How many people do we think we'll have per dwelling? So it's very, very fungible. And obviously we can push and pull as many of these as are relevant to us and ignore the rest. We can also add our own parameters if for whatever reason we had something we wanted to measure, like we're making a business case to the city. Maybe I will add a retail spend per person metric. And I want to calculate this, but at the use level, I'll say for every person we add here, let's add a $15 a day retail spend calculation. I just added a property called retail spend per person as $15. So for you guys, you can just follow along with this little guy here. But I want to show you the purpose of this. It's now an assumption that's stored against the use residential. So go ahead and play with some of those metrics, make up your own, play with the parking ratios. And the key here is watch the data change on the right-hand side. Watch it change as you change the floor plate. And I'm telling you, as a learning methodology here for people who are new to urban design or new to project planning, this is an incredible way to show the relationship between different facets of the plan, or different facets of our development. I'm going to bring this down to 20 levels, so it's less absurd. And off we go. Okay, questions at this point. We've covered quite a lot. We've covered adding data layers, investigating those data layers. We've covered now how to draw with rectangles and then how to assign a use to those rectangles. We've covered going into the assumptions of those uses. And we could stop there, but we're going to keep going. I'd love to hear if there are any questions from the group. There is a chat, a Q&A chat that you can pop your questions in. I will try and open that up if I can figure it out. Oh, thank you, Holly. Perfect. So if there are no questions, we might just keep soldiering on. We haven't done any generative design yet, I may add. The generative stuff will come, and that's where we'll likely go to next. So for demo purposes, and again, you can follow along if you'd like, or you can just watch the screen. What I want to do now is build out a calculation that has nothing to do with this top level set of metrics here. I want to go and do that retail spend scenario. So if you notice here, there's a tab called Analytics. Analytics is basically the mathematician's playground. I love this tool. It's probably my favorite part of Giraffe. I want to build an expression here to look at a business case for why we want a rezoning or whatever it might be, whatever argument you're trying to make. And I'm going to add a measure here. And this is basically a way of me going and building a custom calculation. Think of this like Excel. We're going to choose, instead of cells, we're going to choose components, and then we're going to build a calculation. So the component I want here is I want the resident number of residents, A, where A is the total dwelling residents, multiplied by B, where B is our retail spend per person per day. So A times B, and then let's give them a couple of days off a week, so call it 300 days a year. And we'll call this forecasted retail spend. Dollar dues, 2.7 million, unbelievable. So now when I hit save, I've got a new metric here that I can use, and it's fully parametric. So if I change the number of levels of my residents, or if I drop it down, and we can see the impact here. So this is a great tool when you're trying to evaluate the difference between scenarios. Say, well, scenario 1, which is zoning as is, only generates a little bit of retail spend, but if we approve unlimited residential apartments here, we're going to bring an enormous amount of value to the neighborhood. Okay, so that right there, you can build out very complicated business models or very simple business models that have real visual power to them. There are whole masterclasses we do on this year. There are masterclasses we do on GIS, masterclasses we do on drawing, and I encourage you to attend those because they're very cool. But before we break here, I want to spend 5 minutes talking about generative. And one of the important things with generative is we want it to be, Giraffe's philosophy and viewpoint is that generative design should be designer augmentative. It should enhance the design thinking, not replace the design thinking. So if you notice, when we came to Giraffe, we didn't push a button and get a design. We've been doing the design and we've been getting the numbers. That's the key value of Giraffe. But there are plenty of design jobs that are mind-numbing, that are for a computer much better suited than for a human being to sit there. So if you take our parking, for instance, at the moment, our parking is just solving for a straight parking ratio, 2.5 parks per 1,000 square feet. There's no visual clues on where those bays lay out or whether we thought about circulation or anything like that. We're just applying an assumption. So if I want to use an algorithm to help me do my parking, I can click on the lightning bolts and I can leverage one of Giraffe's pre-baked generative flows. So I'm going to grab the car park from down the bottom and I'm going to draw a rectangle. This time when it draws a rectangle, it's going to be doing a task that's far more complicated than just 2.5 divided by 1,000 multiplied by the area. You can see I've now got these generative bays, and if I move, if it's not a non-linear rectangle, if it's some sort of odd polygon, it's still going to solve around that strange shape. And the parking ratio is now a output as opposed to an input. You can see it's solving for 3.27 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. So it's a lot more efficient than we thought it would be. And very nicely, it's surfacing all those assumptions to us on the left for us to change. So if I want to say, actually, I want bays that are 18 feet long and 9.5 feet wide, and I need a drive aisle that's 24 feet wide, now I can see we're starting to get back to that 2.65. And ironically, shows you that in many ways, sometimes the input and the standardized assumption is just as powerful as the visual, as actually going in there and solving it. However, the degree of confidence you can give somebody with a visual versus just a number is really quite powerful. Okay, so there are lots of different generative tools that are worth exploring, and I'll just rattle off a couple. The roads, I think, are particularly powerful, being able to draw with a line that then places parking either side of the line, along with islands every so often. Again, all of the outputs are configurable by you, all of the assumptions, the width of the number of islands, et cetera, et cetera. This park here, for instance, I might say, you know what, I like seeing the park, but why don't we populate it with some trees? And so I'm going to grab the generative park that has some trees in it. My resi building, I like it as a massing, but my client's asking me how the layout will work. Well, let's go from one level of detail to the next. I'm going to bring in my residential apartments algorithm. And when I draw that, the efficiency is a solve as opposed to an input, because the algorithm is doing its best to lay it out. Again, though, I will warn that Giraffe is not a replacement for how many stairwells do I need. If I want it, like right now, this building has no core, no access, no stairwell. It's actually perfectly solved. And you can see I could scale that to Kingdom Come and it's going to save the way. So if I want to, I can always override the inputs and say, actually, I want there to be a core here. So we're just going to add a core. Now I do have a core going up and down the center. But this could still be deeply structurally unsound. Giraffe is not a replacement for that kind of thinking. That's what your engineers and your architects are for. So I'm going to pause there. There are lots of other tools, but I don't want to overwhelm, even though we probably already have. 30 minutes, I think, is plenty. If you would like to go further, then I would really encourage you to have a conversation with our AI bot down here. It's incredible. This thing is unbelievable. It's a chat GPT on our knowledge base. If I want to ask it something like, how do I draw a resi building with a floor plan? Then it has read our documentation and it will go and read it and give us the answer, which is epic. Or if I need to do something more complicated, like add a GIS layer or whatever, then it'll not only will it tell you what to do, but then it'll link you out to the appropriate documentation to go and figure out what to do. So please do that. We're very happy to talk to you as well. We love talking to people who want to use Giraffe. Don't be afraid of talking to us. We're nice people. There's more stuff on the web. I think Holly's just linked it in there. The YouTube channel is filled with not just how-tos, but then really interesting use cases, like how our customers and our team have used Giraffe to do massive scale master plan or really fine-grained feasibility that looks at facades and whatnot. The world's really your oyster. Giraffe is a totally open and flexible tool. We'd love to work with you. My name's James. You can get me at james@giraffe.build. Please reach out. Any questions before we wrap? Anything come through the chat, Holly?
Nope. Must be clear.
Oh, I got one. Yes, we can send you the recording. That's no problem. I think that'll come through automated. All right. Well, we will wrap it at 30 minutes. Thank you, team, for joining, and please let us know if you'd like to investigate any further. Cheers.